toxic, but this is illegal behavior.
Even more shocking allegations now being revealed against P. Diddy, as former employees now allege he was physically violent, emotionally abusive, and toxic in the workplace.
This is someone who wants his inner circle to be very tight and for people to be around. And so the comfort level with that also comes with the comfort level of the physical abuse and violence. So it does not surprise me that he lays hands on his employees as well.
These former employees say Diddy grabbed, berated, and threatened them, alleging he had uncontrollable violence and created a culture of fear. These accusations eerily similar to those we've already heard. Could all this be a pattern?
And someone doesn't just strike up that behavior once and then never do it again. That is someone who has some deep-seated anger and problems with how they express themselves.
So what's the motive in a case like this?
I think that it's control. I think that he is a classic narcissist.
And what could this mean for Diddy's former employees?
And just coming forward helps with that moment of reckoning and will allow abusers like this to be put down and to stop it.
Plus, does the government have a strong case against Diddy?
So I think that the government has the goods and they know they have the goods.
It's a story we've now been following for months. The epic fall from grace of the once beloved rapper P. Diddy. Once known for his chart-topping hits, he's now making headlines for a different reason. Namely, a series of allegations brought against him by multiple people. These accusers say Diddy is guilty of rape, sexual assault, physical violence, and that he's the kingpin of several major schemes, including drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and gun trafficking. I sat down with trial attorney Krista Ramey to discuss these new allegations and look ahead to what's next.
So right off the bat, I'm not surprised. I have to tell you, when someone behaves this way, as he did in that video to Cassie, and we saw who he was, that was not the first time he did it, and it wasn't the last. Cassie left that room in her bare feet. She was running for her life like there was a fire in the building. That was not the first time he attacked her. You can tell by the way that it all played out. And he did not apologize for his abuse to her. He apologized for what we saw in that video. And someone doesn't just strike up that behavior once and then never do it again. That is someone who has some deep-seated anger and problems with how they express themselves that goes back probably to his childhood. So, and in fact, I think it does, because I think that the nickname Puffy came from when he huffed and puffed when he was a child.
The video Krista's referring to made waves just last month when it was leaked years after it was recorded. It's a security video showing Diddy violently beat his then-girlfriend Cassie. The video is so graphic, we've decided to only show screenshots. All this comes months after we first heard from Cassie, whose legal name is Cassandra Ventura. She filed civil suit against him last November, alleging he physically and sexually assaulted her, took photos of this abuse, and even forced her to have sex with prostitutes during their years-long relationship. Cassie's suit was quickly settled just one day after it was filed, but more civil suits soon followed. Joy Dickerson-Neal filed suit this same month, alleging Diddy raped her in the 90s when she was a student at Syracuse University. She also alleges she's a victim of revenge porn because Diddy apparently recorded this rape and then passed around the video. Liza Gardner also says she was raped by Diddy in New York in the 90s. She says he got physically violent with her and at one point strangled her to the point that she lost consciousness. Jane Doe also alleges that Diddy raped her, but in 2003, when she was only 17 years old. She says Diddy flew her on a private plane from Michigan all the way to his recording studio in New York. She even included photos of them together in her lawsuit. All this brings us to the civil suit filed by Rodney Jones, also known as Lil Rod, who worked as a producer with Diddy on the Love album. Lil Rod's bombshell lawsuit laid out similar allegations and then some, saying that not only did Diddy sexually assault and groom Lil Rod, but he also runs sex, gun, and drug trafficking rings. After this, Diddy made news yet again when federal agents executed search warrants of 2 of his homes in late March. Since then, Diddy has been mentioned in 3 additional suits, namely those filed by Crystal McKinney and April Lampros. Both women alleged Diddy sexually assaulted them in New York. But now, for the first time, we're hearing from those who worked with Diddy in a professional capacity. They spoke to the Daily Beast for this revealing article. There were 5 employees who came forward and they spoke to a magazine. They did want to reveal their identities, though. They said that they had fear of retribution. Why do you
Yeah.
think that they wouldn't reveal their names?
We saw this play out with Harvey Weinstein and, the years of silence in the industry. And the women that did speak up were blackballed. Women like, uh, well, there were several of them. Their names are escaping me right now, but women were blackballed literally from getting jobs in Hollywood because of their allegations against Harvey Weinstein. This is true in a lot of professions. I think this would be true in the legal profession, quite honestly. You do not want to hire someone that might spill your secrets. And, when you're in a kind of industry like rap, hip hop, music industry in general, the secrets around working for a label are protected, and so you want to make sure that people are going to keep quiet. You're also going to have a lot of instances where these employees will sign NDAs and they leave. They'll be given nice severance packages, particularly the ones that were treated poorly, and they'll be asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement in order to receive that severance package. And so that also keeps people quiet, so they can't come forward because then they will be violating that severance agreement and that non-disclosure clause, particularly. And there's usually a liquidated damages element to that, which requires that they pay back a certain sum of money. Sometimes it's unconscionable amount that they'd have to repay back. So I think that's why.
You spoke about NDAs, and this is something we hear commonly when you have a big name celebrity who employs multiple people, sometimes to keep things in the dark, sometimes just because it's their personal life, whatever it may be. So these people sign the NDAs, but my question is, if things are illegal happening in the background, that negates the NDA, right?
Not always, not always. So, because whether or not it's truly illegal, whether the statute of limitations have run, whether a crime has been committed is up to a jury to decide. And so, yes, there are, you cannot, there are laws that protect whistleblowers, that allow whistleblowers to come forward, but you have to fall within that law to be able to come forward under the whistleblower statutes. So what happens is that they, and even if the employee is still afraid to come forward, and when you have a figure like, Sean Combs, who is aggressive, violent, unpredictable, you're not going to want to challenge that by bringing these allegations forward. And there's also a lot of shame that goes along with it. And so it takes a lot of courage for people to come forward. I know that Cassie did not come forward for years after her abuse. And, it takes a lot for, a domestic survivor to speak out and come forward. And that accounts to 15% of all violent crime in the United States, domestic violence abuse. So it's more relevant and more common than we know.
The ex-employees who have spoken out worked for Diddy's Sean John fashion company, or Blue Flame, an ad agency. A female employee there alleged Diddy once grabbed her face after a disagreement. She said, quote, "He didn't like that I wasn't agreeing with him and he wasn't interested in hearing my point of view." Then Diddy apparently said to her, "When you speak to me, you should imagine you're talking to fashion icon Karl Lagerfeld. Anything I say, assume that it's coming from Karl Lagerfeld." This employee says that she started looking for a new job immediately after this incident. As for the allegations against him, she says, quote, "I'm sorry it took this long. I hope he gets what's coming to him." We first saw these allegations back in November with several of the civil lawsuits. Since then, we've seen several more. But now, almost a year later, we're hearing from these employees. Why now would they be coming forward?
Well, I think that Rolling Stone did a similar piece as well, and I think that what we're learning is that a lot of these pieces that were done by these reporters, they've been working on these pieces for months and months. So they may have been working on them as far back as when Cassie's claims first came out, and it takes a while for a reporter, as you know, to get people to come forward and to provide you with information. So I don't think that this was just a sudden thing or a piling on thing. I think that this was just a matter of journalistic integrity, where they're making sure that these people, who are anonymous, giving this information anonymously, that they're credible and that they're corroborated before you go to print on something like this, because you don't want to risk a defamation lawsuit on the back end.
Another employee who spoke to the Daily Beast alleges he was fired after making eye contact with Diddy. Apparently, Diddy had been late to a meeting, and this employee looked at him to address this. After that, he was allegedly let go. This same employee says that Diddy created a culture of fear, calling it the worst experience I ever had in my life. It got so bad, he says some employees would leave every time Diddy entered the building just to avoid him. He said there was, quote, a lot of profanity, kind of aggressive, in your face, physically in your face kind of stuff. If we're taking a closer look at some of these allegations, there were about 5 employees who told the magazine a couple of different situations. They worked at different companies. There's a lot of different things happening. But one of the things that stood out to me is that P. Diddy allegedly would get physically violent with some of these employees, grab their faces, grab their mouths, get really close to their face, scream in their faces. I mean, to me, this sounds like a very toxic work environment. What is your take on that?
Toxic, but just, I mean, this is illegal behavior. You cannot put hand, this is battery, it's criminal battery. And so, back to that not being the first instance of violence that we saw in that tape of Cassie, I'm not surprised that he becomes physical with his employees. He's close to his employees. He invites his employees to go to parties. They hang out with him to the wee hours of the morning. He flies them around on his private jets into his homes in Miami and LA. This is someone who wants his inner circle to be very tight and for people to be around. And so the comfort level with that also comes with the comfort level of the physical abuse and violence. So it does not surprise me that he lays hands on his employees as well.
Another former employee says they had a similar experience. They told the Daily Beast, quote, I was surrounded by security guards who rushed over when Diddy was 6 inches from my face, screaming at me, telling me I effed up. So why would these people have not immediately reported it to the police? Could it be that they were worried about their careers?
Yeah, again, I think it takes us back to the whole thing with worried about if I come forward and say something when he is a powerful music mogul. I am, I'm an intern. I'm trying to get my foot in the door in this industry or whatever it is. Will I be believed? And will he have people to say, I was in the room, that didn't happen? And a prosecutor's not going to take that case, and they know it. And I think that that's why a lot of times people do not come forward. But strength in numbers. Now there's so many people coming forward that I think that you have that comfort level now. Maybe now you might have more people coming forward and not doing so anonymously. Maybe now you'll get some people to come forward and assign their names to their statements, hopefully.
That same employee mentioned that Cassie security video, saying, I was surprised by the level of violence that he had toward Cassie in that video. I didn't see his anger going to that level. I really didn't. I wouldn't have stayed had I known what was going on, I'll tell you that much. It was after the release of that security video that we heard from Diddy for the first time in 6 months about the allegations.
So, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy, and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
One of Diddy's former employees at Blue Flame says she saw an uncontrollable rage like the one shown on that security video. She says everyone was kind of cautioned that, oh, he might say something weird or something off, but they were told that they should just turn the other way. She says Diddy acted this way to demean those professionally beneath him, specifically women. And it's obvious that the physical side of things were illegal, but then if we talk about some of the other things, it kind of gets murky. One of the employees said that he perpetuated a culture of fear. That's where it's kind of confusing to me. Is that illegal harassment or pinning employees against each other? It sounds to me toxic for sure, but is that illegal?
It's toxic. Yes, absolutely. It's harassing. Yes. But is it illegal or discriminatory or, that probably not. Now, if you can tie it to your gender, potentially yes. So if he is doing this because you're a woman, and that is where the root of it is. That's where the animus comes from. Then yes, it becomes illegal. It becomes improper, and you can sue for that. And that just becomes a regular garden variety, sexual harassment in the workplace, hostile work environment lawsuit. Now, if it's just berating, pitting people against each other for competition's sake, that's just a toxic work environment. You've got at will employment agreements. You can leave at any time. There you have it.
It's interesting that you brought up the gendered side of things because several of the employees said that they were females and they felt that Diddy was specifically going against them. They even said in some of their quotes, he never went after males, he only did this to females. So do you think that they could have a strong case?
They could, but they could have a case that's expired. So you have statute of limitations issues, of course. When and I did notice that as well. I mean, like actually touching people, like rubbing their back and caressing them. I mean, that's just not appropriate. But the issue is going to be statute of limitations. Here in California, you've got very strict laws. When it comes to statutes of limitations, you have to, file your claims within certain periods of time. And if you don't, then you lose those claims. And every state in the country has those same claims. So, or those same statutes of limitations that prevent, claims to be open forever. There are differences when it comes to sexual violence and sexual abuse. Those claims are a little bit longer in terms of the statute of limitations, but you know, grabbing someone's face is probably not, within that, even if it's discriminatory based upon gender.
Let's pause this P. Diddy story for a quick second to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law and Crime news package. It's stories like this that remind you you never know what's going to happen, and the world is an unpredictable place. So when you're hurt, it can be confusing, it can be scary, and you don't really know where to turn. Well, enter Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. You can submit a claim in 8 clicks or less on your phone and then find out if you have a case. If you do, your injury could be worth millions. In the past couple of months, they've gotten verdicts of $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia, and $6.8 million in New York. Also, they have over 1,000 lawyers, so you know you'll be in good hands. So if you're injured, you can start by easily submitting a claim at www.forthepeople.com/LCnews or by dialing #law. That's #529 on your phone. Now back to our story. As for whether Diddy could face criminal charges for any of these alleged incidents, things get a little more complicated. And a lot of people who felt that so-called wrath of P. Diddy obviously were frightened. They're not even coming forward with their names right now. They're so scared about it. But are there rights for employees that they maybe don't realize?
All of us have rights in terms of workplace. Workplace violence is not okay. It is illegal. If your employer is putting hands on you, then you should go to the police. There are ways to protect you, but I think that what you have here, when you've got claims that are older, you run into those statutes of limitations, both on the criminal and on the civil side. So unfortunately, for the most part, a lot of those people that came forward anonymously or didn't come forward at all really have no recourse in terms of getting anything from P. Diddy. But what I will say is when you speak up and you come forward, you are helping, because that alone, that act of bringing more voices to it is what shuts it down. And now you're not getting as much toxicity, for instance, in Hollywood because of what happened with Harvey Weinstein. People aren't taking things anymore. I think each industry needs to have their moment of reckoning when it comes to this, and just coming forward helps with that moment of reckoning and will allow abusers like this to be put down and to stop it.
About the motive, why Diddy would have acted this way, Krista has a few ideas. And we've talked about this culture of fear, or Diddy pitting coworkers against each other, some people being scared to make eye contact with him or even coming to work at all. What do you think is the basis for all of this going on in Diddy's head, if you could imagine?
I think that it's control. I think that he is a classic narcissist. If you go back to his childhood, his father was like worked for a drug kingpin in New York and died, was murdered when he was young. He always kind of had that thug life mentality, and but he's very smart. He went to Howard. He's not, so he had. There's kind of a two sides of the same coin, right? But to him, that is power. That being able to put that kind of control over people is what gives that kind of narcissist their energy, and they feed off of that. So it's a kind of a continuous cycle for him, and I think that that is where it comes from. I've got absolute control. You're scared for me. That means you're going to do exactly what I want. You're going to do it perfectly on the first time because you don't want to get the wrath of P. Diddy.
It's important to note the Daily Beast did speak to a former employee who didn't experience any of the alleged violence. He said, quote, "Diddy could be intimidating and scary and mean, but there was always this underlying professionalism to him. You felt like he was pushing you to get the absolute best last little bit out of you." We have had several people come forward, really the basis of our interview today, but in that same article, there was at least one person who said, "I worked with P. Diddy and I never saw any of this. It's a complete shock to me." What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that person also said though that they were not surprised what they saw in the video with Cassie. So, I wonder if this is still just a P. Diddy loyalist, or some people are protected from that. So, not every employee is going to see everything. And so I am certain that there are people that probably never, had their face grabbed by him or were physically assaulted by him or, berated by him. So I think that those things can be true, but it's telling to me that that same person also thought that what he saw was not surprised in what they saw in the video with Cassie. That tells me that this person also knows that they heard these rumors and that he probably has that capacity.
When we're talking P. Diddy, it seems like all roads lead back to Cassie because she's really the one who opened the floodgates with her allegations. And actually, in her civil suit, she mentioned some of Diddy's employees and said that they could have witnessed some of the abuse that she alleges. So is it possible that some of these employees could be called to a grand jury? We're hearing rumblings now that these people are coming forward, some of the accusers, but could it also be employees?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that there's probably a grand jury impaneled right now as we speak in this case. The way that the raids happened in March, and you're getting the leak all of a sudden of the video from, I don't know how that happened, but sometimes things are strategically leaked, whatever. But I would suspect that there's a grand jury that's impaneled right now, and that those people that did not talk then, they will be compelled to talk in a grand jury. And you know, there's ways to protect witnesses in grand juries. This is why they're secret when they're going on. But they're not going to have that option when it comes to testifying in a legal proceeding. You don't get to say, I don't want to do it. If you're under subpoena, you have to do it.
Just this month, we reported that the feds are now assembling a grand jury of accusers who would testify about their experiences with Diddy. We spoke about the grand jury, and that kind of seems to be the next step in the trajectory of the case against P. Diddy. Obviously, no indictment as of yet, but we're hearing lots about this grand jury. If you're just going to hypothesize where the case is headed, what do you expect?
I think you should look at R. Kelly. I think that you're going to see racketeering, sex trafficking. You're going to see probably money laundering, guns and weapons charges. I think that's what we're going to end up seeing. And I don't think it's going to be that long off that we see it. They can have as many grand juries as they want. What happens is, what you can see is a grand jury swear out an indictment and recommend that charges be brought. And then what happens is they can still continue to do work. You saw this, for instance, I think in the Trump case in Georgia. And you see this in other cases as well, where they continue to do work, and then all of a sudden there's new charges brought. So oftentimes that's what you see. I don't think you're going to see that here. I think that they are going to put everything in. I mean, they did those very massive public raids of his homes. I don't think that they're going to be doing things in piecemeal. I think that they want to make sure that things are buttoned up and that they've got everything that they need to get before they make that arrest.
But as to when Diddy could be arrested or charged, there's room for speculation. So I've heard back and forth mixed reviews from people. Some people are like, it's right around the corner. Some say it's going to be months. What is your take on that?
So if you would have asked me back in March when the raids happened, I would have said it was imminent. I would have said that there's probably already an indictment and they're getting additional information. But now I think that the grand jury is impaneled. I think that it maybe even have been impaneled then, but they're still doing the work. The grand jury is still doing their work. So I would suspect that within the next 2 to 3 months that we'll see indictments sworn out.
Do you think that the government has a strong case against P. Diddy?
Based on what I've seen, yes. You're not going to do that kind of public show and tell if you don't have the goods. You really aren't. It doesn't serve the Department of Justice any good to have the ATF and the FBI conduct dual raids on both coasts if you don't know that you've got the goods and you know what you're going to find in those homes. And they found a lot. They took out a lot of evidence. So I think that the government has the goods and they know they have the goods.
If and when an indictment does come down, Krista believes there may be more defendants than just Diddy.
I think that what you might find is that in addition to charges with P. Diddy, there might be also criminal charges brought against Bad Boy Records and perhaps Sean John Clothing Company as well. Because when you talk about what was happening in the workplace and the violence that was occurring there, you could probably also imagine that there was a lot of drugs and money and all of those things that we're talking about going through both places as well, particularly with Bad Boy Records. Those parties, those notorious parties, those were thrown by Sean Combs and Bad Boy Records. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bad Boy Records is not also part of the criminal indictment.
Just last month, we heard from Diddy himself on social media, but aside from that, we've only gotten a few statements from his legal representation. In regards to the federal raids, Diddy's team released a statement calling it a, quote, gross overuse of military-level force, saying there's no excuse for the excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities or the way his children and employees were treated. In response to Lil Rod's lawsuit, Diddy's team says in part, quote, his reckless name-dropping about events that are pure fiction and simply did not happen is nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner headlines. This is a developing story that will continue to follow and bring you the latest developments as they unfold. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.